Hey friends, I hope your week is off to a great start. It's the start of Girl Scout cookie season, and I figured this would be the perfect time to share with you my method for making a Samoa's Girl Scout cookie inspired ice cream cake. So it's super basic. I've done this a bunch of times and people always love it. So let's get right into it. The first thing you're going to need is some ice cream. I'm just using store-bought ice cream here. Typically, I would use the Samoa's Girl Scout cookie ice cream, but I could not find that at the store. So instead, I've got this caramel swirled gelato. So I don't think I'm going to need both of these containers. Probably just 1.5 will be fine. And you want your ice cream to be soft, not fully melted, but you can see mine is pretty soft here. So it's going to be nice and easy to mix, but it's not totally soupy and melted. Now to this, I'm going to swirl in some toasted coconut. So this is just shredded sweetened coconut. Next up, I've got some shortbread cookies. So I'm just using a store-bought shortbread cookie because I wasn't really planning on having to do this at all. I thought I was going to be able to buy that Samoa's ice cream that was ready. I don't want them to be too big, just maybe this size, the size of kind of like a normal smallish crouton. I'm going to give that just a quick toss. The last thing I'm going to add to the ice cream is this magic shell. So this will give us that kind of crispy, crunchy chocolatiness that is reminiscent of a Samoa. So the bottom of the cookie has the chocolate as well as the drizzle on the top. So this magic shell is going to set up hard and we'll have a crunchy layer of chocolate through the ice cream. And you don't want to over mix it because you want some pockets. Now I've got my cake pan lined with cling film. This is the same size cake pan as what I'm going to bake my cakes in. So I'm going to just go ahead and scrape this ice cream into the lined pan. And now just flatten this down. I'm going to do just a quick drizzle here. So this is ready to go into the freezer. I'm just going to press the cling film down onto the surface of the ice cream. And you want to let this freeze until it is fully set. So this could take 2 to 3 hours. That's why I'm doing it before I'm baking my cake. That way this can freeze the entire time I'm making the cake, the whole time the cakes bake, and the whole time the cakes are cooling, because this needs to be fully firm. If it's a little bit wobbly and melty, you're going to have a really rough time decorating the cake. So into the freezer it goes. So while that ice cream chills in the freezer, we can go ahead and make the cake. So the recipe that I'm using here is Rick's recipe for the Chocolate Blackout Cake. I've tested that before, so you can click here to see the full step-by-step of that process. I'm going to run through it really quickly here. So first up, I've got my dry ingredients. I need to sift these together. If you have any lumps of cocoa or flour, you can just push those through the sieve. And now that that is all sifted, we can whisk it to get it evenly incorporated. With the dry ingredients evenly incorporated, now we can go on to the wet here. So using the same whisk, I'm going to whisk together all of my wet ingredients. Now I've got some hot water here. Now I'm going to dump all of the dry into the wet, and we'll whisk this just to get it combined. All right, and that was maybe 30 seconds of mixing. You can see that the batter is nice and smooth and glossy. It looks really thick and luxurious. With this ready to go, we can divide it evenly between our 2 baking dishes. So this is just my 8-inch round pan. I greased it with butter, lined it with parchment paper, greased it with more butter, and dusted with cocoa powder. So again, the full step-by-step is in the Blackout Cake video. And I am going to weigh this because I want to be as precise as possible. All right, so these are evenly divided. We're going to pop this into the middle of our preheated oven for 25 to 35 minutes until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. So while that cake bakes, we can move on to making the frosting. So first up, we're going to need 6 large egg yolks. And as always, I'm saving my whites for another recipe. And I'm going to give the egg yolks just a quick stir to get them broken apart. Okay, cool. So that's a nice kind of egg yolk soup. To this, I'm going to add the evaporated milk. Now, be careful when you're at the store. There's evaporated milk and there's sweetened condensed milk. Frequently, they're next to each other at the store. You want evaporated. This is just milk that's been evaporated. Sweetened condensed is kind of this, but with sugar added to it. We're adding our own sugar, so we don't need that. So I'm going to pour in this entire can. I'm also adding the granulated sugar and our unsalted butter, plus a 3-finger pinch of kosher salt. All right, cool. So we're going to pop this on the stove over medium-high. So now over medium-high heat, I am going to stir this continuously until the butter's completely melted and the sugar is fully dissolved. It should take just about 3 to 4 minutes. It's been slightly over 4 minutes, the butter is completely melted, our sugar is fully dissolved, and now we're going to cook this for another 12 to 14 minutes. We're looking for the texture to thicken up so that it kind of coats the back of the spoon when you rub your finger through it. If you can't tell if you're there just by sight alone, which is okay, use a thermometer. You're looking for 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is looking pretty thick to me. Running my finger along the spoon, it looks good. I'm going to double check with the thermometer just to see if we're at 170. And not quite there yet. This is probably going to need another minute or so. So the base of the icing is nice and thick. It's deepened in color just a little bit. Now I've turned the heat off and we're ready to add in the vanilla and toasted coconut. And just stir that together to get everything evenly incorporated. So this looks absolutely delicious right now. However, it is super, super hot. So don't touch this, don't taste it. It will burn you. We're gonna let this cool down to room temperature. It should take about an hour, and during that time while it cools, it's gonna thicken up even more than it is right now. And that gives us time to let the cakes continue cooling, to let the ice cream continue freezing. Plus, we need to make some chocolate ganache for our crumb coat. So let's get on to that. The final component of this recipe is making the chocolate ganache. We're going to use this as a crumb coat, and if there's leftover, maybe we'll do some decorating with it. So in a measuring jug, I've got 6 ounces of heavy cream. To that, I'm going to add a really high quality dark chocolate chip. So this is a 1-to-1 ratio. I've got 6 ounces of heavy cream, 6 ounces of chocolate. That's going to give me a nice, thick, spreadable consistency once it cools down. So the process here is really basic. I'm going to pop this into the microwave on half power. All right, and that took only about 1.5 minutes. So you can see here, I'm not fully melted, but you don't want to scorch your chocolate. So stop, let that residual heat in the cream kind of permeate into the chocolate. And this will come together. It's just going to take a little bit of stirring. And I think we're going to be all the way there. Yeah, so this is looking great. If you're scared of microwaving chocolate, you can definitely do this over a double boiler. It'll take a lot longer and you're going to get the same result though. So whatever you want to do is totally fine. So I'm going to let this hang out at room temperature until all of our other components have cooled down and are ready to use. If it gets too thick, we can always put it back in the microwave just for a couple seconds to loosen it. All right, so the cakes have been cooling for a little over 2 hours, so they are cool to the touch at this point, and we are ready to take them out of the pans. So I'm going to run just a butter knife around the perimeter here just to make sure that nothing is sticking. I'm going to flip this out and then peel off the parchment paper. So using my ruler, I'm just checking generally what the height is. So I guess I'm going to do 1 inch. We'll get the dome off the cake. And now I'm just holding the knife flat while rotating the cake around on the turntable. I'm trying to keep the knife still, and I'm kind of just letting the cake pull the knife toward the center. Let the rotational motion kind of do the work, and that'll help you keep your knife level while you cut through here. I've got my cake top here. This is for snacks later. And you do the second cake exactly the same way. Our ice cream circle has been in the freezer for over 4 hours at this point, so it is pretty firm to the touch. It's not completely solid, but I think we're going to be okay. And so since we wrap this in cling film, we should be able to lift it out pretty neatly. And you want to work quickly here because every moment that this is out of the freezer is the moment that it's starting to melt. And I'm not putting any frosting between the layers because I like the cake and the ice cream being in direct contact with each other so that as the ice cream melts, when you're eating it, it goes directly into the cake. I'm going to check, make sure that we're approximately centered. So I'm just rotating the ice cream around, making sure that it's sitting on there the way that we need it to. And then I'm going to take this layer and I'm putting cut side against the cake. Again, spinning it around just to make sure that it's all level. That looks good. So now we've got the chocolate ganache. So it's been out at room temperature for about an hour. So you can see it's thickened up. It's not hot at all, but it still looks like nice and spreadable. So this is just going to be a really thin coating. I'm not trying to be thick here. Using a bench scraper, I'm just going to run this around the outside. And this is just the crumb coat. You know, it's not supposed to be perfect. We're just trying to get the crumbs locked in. So I'm not going to stress about this too much. And so this is far from perfect. However, I do have a nice even coating of ganache all the way around the cake. The crumbs are going to be locked in. And now we're going to pop this into the freezer for about 30 minutes to let the ganache fully set. So our crumb coat has been setting for 30 minutes and it is fully set, so no fingerprints coming off here, and we are ready to get this frosted. So I've got my cooled coconut frosting here. I'm going to put a gigantic blob on the top. It may be a little thick, but it's easier to take it off than it is to put it back on. So I'm going to push over the edge here. So you can see this is a really generous layer of frosting. I want it on nice and thick so that when I scrape it off, I can just flatten it out and get it all level in one pass rather than having to go back and fill in short spots and that sort of thing. So this is looking like I've got a nice thick layer of icing. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to hold the scraper perpendicular to the cake and just spin it around. So I think that this looks pretty good actually. I think my sides are pretty nice looking. The top seems flat to me. I think it's a thick layer of frosting everywhere. And I had a little extra toasted coconut left over, so I think I'm just going to sprinkle a little of this on the top and a little on the sides. I had a little bit of ganache left over, so I put it in a little sandwich bag. I am liking the appearance of this. I'm going to go ahead and pop this back into the freezer. You want to chill it for at least 4 hours. I'm going to leave mine in for overnight. So the cake's been chilling in the freezer overnight, so the ice cream is fully set, and this is the finished product. So you can see we've got a nice even layer of chocolate cake on the top and on the bottom. The ice cream layer in the middle here is nice and thick. It's the perfect amount for this much cake. You can see all of the swirling through the ice cream here with the cookie pieces, the chocolate, and the caramel swirls. Nice even layer of the coconut caramel frosting, and if you look closely, just a thin coat of dark chocolate ganache. I'm dying to dig into this, and I've got to eat my cake on its side. I don't know how people go in top first. It's too much pressure, and that cake's going to tip over. So I'm going to do it a favor and lie it down. What I love about the size of this cake is it's the perfect amount to take a bite from the top. You get half the ice cream with a little bit of cake. Mmm. The cake texture is so nice and soft, even though it's cold. And then your second bite here, you get the rest of the ice cream plus the cake. So this is a pretty ideal eating experience from my POV. The flavors are everything that I love about the Girl Scout cookie. It's got that really toasty coconut flavor, a lot of caramel, a lot of chocolate. It's nice and rich. It's not sicky sweet though. Would have been nice if I could get the Girl Scout cookies ice cream and save myself a couple steps with the filling here, but I think the result was worth the while. So overall, I'm really happy with how this cake turned out, and I'm going to continue making it. So I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, please be sure to give me a big thumbs up and click subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.